Hello. Come on, you guys got to be more awake than first service. So it's my only goal for you right now. And get the jokes. If you could get the jokes, that'd be really helpful today. So anyway, I've been hearing, you hear a lot about climate change. I don't think I understood it, because I guess what it means is we're changing climates with Seattle. Is that what that means? Every Sunday we're just become Seattle. I think that's what's happening. See, like that. That was a joke. You're supposed to laugh. It really helps me out if you're actually, paying enough attention to get the joke. So that's just that. So since not enough of you laughed, we're going to start with a gross story. I don't mean 144 story, a gross. That was a joke too. Pay attention. They're coming fast and furious. I had a lot of caffeine between services, so who knows what's happening here. I tell you a gross story. See, a few years ago, I had something really weird happen in my left eye. And as a result, the treatment, you ready for this? The treatment was for 3 consecutive months, I had to get a shot in my left eye. Yeah, that's the exact proper response to that. That was some nastiness. Here, this is a picture of me, just to prove it. Right before I get one of the shots, they would put a sticker over, make sure they gave you the shot in the proper eye. Like I was going to let them put a shot in the wrong eye. But I would have been motivated on that one. And it's every bit as fun as you would imagine it is. If you've never had a shot in your eye, it's just as much fun as you would imagine. And by the third one, when it was month 3, I went in and I had decided I'm going to talk the guy out of this one. I think I've got my spiel worked up. Things are going great. I'm healing fine. I do not need the 3rd shot. And so we're getting ready to go in, and there's a waiting room, of course, and there's 3 of us with the check marks. And so we, of course, get together, and we're talking, and one of them, it was a couple, and I believe the guy was the one getting the shot, and we were talking about why we had to get it and all that stuff, and it was like our 2nd or 3rd for both of us, and we hated it and all that stuff. And then there's an old woman, and I mean, and I don't mean to be, she's like in her late 80s, 90s woman, frail, picture little old woman. This is who she is, okay? This is the woman who's sitting here with the check mark over her eye. And so we both tell our stories of how terrible life is for us. And she says, basically, I'm not minding it as much because now I'm only getting 1 shot per month. I used to get a shot in each eye every month, and now it's only 1. And, of course, I felt like, you're complaining. You're going to try to talk the doctor out of 1 shot, and she gets 1 every month you shouldn't do that. So, of course, I go in to see the doctor, and I tried to talk him out of it. I put everything I had. I gave it my best spiel. I've never been ignored. I don't know. There may have been a teenage girl I was hitting on who ignored me with that much ability, but he ignored me completely, gave me the 3rd shot. But the lady had a different perspective because she'd been there. She'd been through it repeatedly. It was kind of a routine thing for her. When you've not been through something before, it's more challenging. When there's a big problem coming up in your life, you're in the middle of a big problem, and you've never gone through it, that's rough. When there's a big opportunity in your life, when you got a chance for something big to happen in your life, and you've never had an opportunity like that before, it's tough. There's a real anxiety that can come with it. And today we're doing our series on But First, and we're talking about something that happened for the first time. Let's go ahead and read it. We're in Joshua chapter 3 and 4 today. And in Joshua 3, we're going to start out. And remember, last week they sent the spies into the promised land. The Israelites are finally coming out of the wilderness after 40 years of wandering, and they're getting ready to go into the promised land. And they sent the spies in, and the spies have come back out, and now they're preparing. And here it says, early in the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left Acacia Grove and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River, where they camped before crossing. 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, now, Paul's Ark of the Covenant, you know what that is. You've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. And honestly, the one they have in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they didn't do a terrible job designing it similar to what it's described in the Bible, except for the whole take it off and their faces melt thing. That was new. But the Ark itself, that's basically what it kind of looks like. And so they're carrying it, and they're going to carry it on 2 poles. There's each 2 poles go through 2 rings on the left side, 2 poles go through 2 rings on the right side, and they carry it on their shoulders. And the picture basically is like you've seen Oriental and Eastern, how the king will be carried on a platform up here. That's how they carried the ark. The ark was on a platform being held up as royalty because the presence of God. So when you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, move out from your positions and follow them. Since you've never traveled this way before, they will guide you. Since you've never traveled this way before. This is brand new. You've spent 40 years in the wilderness. You've had lots of challenges. Lots of interesting things have happened. You've never invaded a land to take possession because it's the promised land. You've never done anything vaguely resembling this. You've never been this way before, okay? They're going to guide you. Stay about half a mile behind them, keeping a clear distance between you and the ark. Make sure you don't come any closer. And then he tells them in verse 5, then Joshua told the people, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. Now, this is one of the most important things when you're getting ready to go into a problem or an opportunity. This is one of the most important things. And by the way, there's only three states of humans. You've only got 3 categories of where you are as a person. You are in trouble, you just got out of trouble, or if you're a Southerner, you're fixing to get in trouble. That's the only options you have. There are no other options. You are in trouble, getting out of trouble, or fixing to get back in trouble. Okay? So when I start talking about problems, I'm not talking about some theoretical thing that may happen to you. You're going to have problems. But you're also going to have opportunities. And one of the most important things when it comes to your opportunities and your problems, when it comes to the big ones, is to align yourself with God's principles. Align yourself with God's principles. I have seen so many times, and this is not always the case, but I've seen so many times where somebody goes into a real big problem, something really bad happens in their lives. And I know they weren't really aligned with God's principles. They may have been showing some signs. They may have been doing a couple little things, but they weren't really working to align themselves, to live God's standards. They weren't spending time with God. They were keeping God at a distance, and they hit a big problem, and they absolutely fall apart. I've seen so many people who, when they hit a big problem, because they're not aligned, it's a catastrophe. They crash and burn. It's happened so many times in my life. I've seen it so many times with people that I'm like, Now, I'm not saying that everybody who crashes and burns was out of alignment, but I am saying that everybody who's out of alignment crashes and burns. It's been universal, everything I've seen. However, I've also seen people who get great blessing or great opportunity who are out of alignment with God's standards. I've seen them crash and burn too. Because they weren't ready for a big blessing. They weren't ready for a big opportunity. They weren't ready for something really good to happen to them because they were out of alignment with God. I know specifically of one instance of somebody that I kind of knew, and they didn't win the lottery, but they were lottery adjacent, which meant they were family and enough money poured out that it poured all over them too. And I watched their lives just fall apart. Because they were not aligned with God's standards, so when the blessing came, they weren't ready for it. And everything in their life just collapsed. And you've probably seen it too. You've seen the person who got their promotion and wasn't ready for it, and emotionally they just went crazy. You saw the person who's been through a death in the family and wasn't ready, wasn't aligned with God, and just watched them just collapse. I'm not saying that don't mourn, but I'm saying they didn't recover. So you need to be aligned with God's standards. That is so important if you're going to survive when problems hit. And I'm not talking about something spectacular or weird. I'm talking about just the basics of what it takes to be aligned with God. Now, we talk about it here a lot. We talk about our 3-2-1 concept, which is like a minimal thing to stay aligned with God. I try to bring it up at least once a month. I tell our leaders to bring it up, to ask people about it. Because here it is, just a reminder, or if you're new, what we say is you need to be spending time with God 3 times a week. 3 days a week, you need to have some time with God. Now, I really think 5 is a better number, but I'm giving you A, 3, 2, 1 is easy to remember, and B, 3 will get you started. So you're spending time with God, reading the Bible and praying at least 3 times a week. And if you're just completely, I don't know what to do, I do 3 videos, 3 1-minute videos that are little devotional videos. I do 3 of them a week. Just watch them on stuffstevesays.com or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. Any of those, they're there. Just watch them and pray, and you're started. You're starting the process. Now, I'm not saying that's perfect alignment, but at least you're moving in the right direction. So you need to spend 3 times a week in time with God, minimum. You need to be in church worshiping, in here, learning and growing and getting the teaching at least twice a month. Now, I know I would prefer 4 and 5 a month, but for a lot of you, two's a challenge, so shoot for it. Make sure you're getting at least 2 of those. And once a month, you need to be with some other believers talking about stuff, talking about what's challenging you, just whatever a connection group needs to do for you. And commercial, we're just launching a whole bunch of connection groups next week. Not this week, next week they're all launching. We've got groups pretty close to every night of the week. Daytime, we've got them all over the place, and it's a 6-week thing. You're going to do it for 6 weeks so you can get a taste and see just how cool it kind of is. And it's not going to be heavy. We're going to take the sermon, and I'm going to write some questions, some discussion questions, so the groups can get together if this is what they want to do, and they just talk about what they learned from the sermon and how God spoke to them through the sermon and maybe push to some greater application. And let me be, and it's not going to be, guys, tell me about your feelings. That's not it. We're not trying to get a bunch of guys in a circle to talk about your feelings. We're not going to do that because you're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that either. Okay? We're also not going to put a bunch of pressure on you. I subbed for Dale Schrader. I taught his connection group a few weeks ago. And in the group, there were about 6 or 7 guys. And a couple of the guys were talkative, which is cool. And one guy was like pretty new to the whole thing. And I would ask him a question or two. I'd say, what do you have? And he goes, I don't feel like I'm not comfortable talking yet. I said, cool. That's fine. If you don't want to talk while you get comfortable, that's fine. There's no pressure. There's nobody going, it's time for us to tell us your deepest, darkest secret. No. It's you get together with some people, and as you build trust, you then start asking and answering questions for each other, and you start noticing things about each other, and you grow closer to each other. And that's all we're saying. You need to be at least once a month, you need to be with some people who are also Christians who can challenge you and encourage you and help you move in the right direction, okay? And if you do these 3 things, you're on the path to some alignment with God and his principles. You're going to be learning his word. You're going to be learning the principles. You're going to be applying them to your life. So when the big challenge comes, the big problem comes, the big opportunity comes, you won't be a train wreck. You'll be able to get on through it, okay? Does that make sense? So let's keep moving. We got all our people on the wrong side of the river, okay? So we're all at the Jordan River. Let's keep reading. In the morning, Joshua said to the priests, lift up the Ark of the Covenant and lead the people across the river. And so they started out and went ahead of the people. And then they said, give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the banks of the Jordan River, take a few steps into the river and stop there. That's an intriguing plan. Can I just say, that's an intriguing plan. If I were looking for a plan to get a bunch of people across a river, I would have a plan, let's say that they're pre-plastic, so I would have a plan that included wood. Bridges, boats, barges, something like that. Theirs is walk into the water. Okay, God. Here's what the plan is. The priests will carry the ark of the Lord of the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of the water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the ark of the covenant ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. There's a challenge here I'm going to talk about in just a second. As soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel, all bunch of them, had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Now, here's the thing about this issue. The Jordan was at flood stage. Now, I don't know if you've not possibly haven't seen the Jordan River. Here's a picture of the Jordan River. We were there last June. And you can see Now it's probably lower than it was that many years ago, but still, that's it. Now, I don't know what you called that growing up, but I grew up in the country. We would have called that a creek. I'm from the way back country. We would have called it a creek. It's not even going to be a creek. It's a creek. Okay? And when it wasn't at flood stage, it wasn't that big of an obstacle. People crossed it all the time. They just waded across. They'd find a shallow spot, and they'd walk across. Your sandals got wet, but maybe you could just carry those. Hike up your robe a little bit and hike across. But it was flood stage, so they had to get it parted because you couldn't just cross in flood stage, which brings up the question, why are they getting there at flood stage? How long have they been in the wilderness? Bible geeks, how long did they spend in the wilderness? 40 years. And you couldn't shortchange the plan, move the plan around a little bit to get them there like a few weeks early? Or maybe a few weeks later? Is that beyond the ability of God to get them there when the river's not at flood stage? Wait a second. See, I am told by lots of people today that if I follow God's plan, if I stay on His path, if I do things His way, things will be easier. The Israelites were right on God's plan, and it made life harder. So this is not a point you're going to like. But when you're aligned with God, be ready for the tough path. Be ready for God to take you down the tough path, not always the easy path. God could have made this simple by changing the dates slightly. No miracle required. Now, somebody might say, Steve, do you really believe that God made the water stop? Do you think yeah, I don't have any trouble with it because here's the thing. I believe in an all-powerful God who created the heavens and the earth. And if you're all-powerful, the big word is omnipotent. If you want to reach into your universe and fiddle with stuff a little bit, it's not that big a deal. And so for an all-powerful God to occasionally reach into His universe and tweak things some, stop some water here, whatever, it's not that big a deal. God's allowed to do it. So I don't really spend a lot of time worrying about the miracles. I figure if God wants to do a miracle, He can. I think they're very rare. I don't think God does a miracle like every 15 minutes. And I don't call a sunset a miracle because it happens every day. And God doesn't have to step in to make that happen. But occasionally God reaches into His universe and He does something that's God only. And I think He did it here. But the weird thing is, it wasn't necessary. Which isn't strange for God. God frequently does things that are unnecessary just to make them more challenging. He'll frequently put us through situations that are more challenging than they have to be just to teach us and help us grow. If you go through the Gospels, the stories about the life of Jesus, you'll see Him rather frequently. He'll do a miracle. He'll heal somebody on the Sabbath. And every time there is trouble. Somebody gets upset, somebody gets in trouble, somebody gets hauled before the guards, somebody gets hauled before the leadership, somebody gets in trouble every time He does a miracle on the Sabbath, and He does quite a few of them. And here's the wild thing about every miracle He did on the Sabbath, every one of them could have waited 6 hours. Every one of them He could have waited till sunset, because their Sabbath ran from sundown on what we would call Friday evening to sundown on Saturday. And there was not a single one He couldn't have showed up 12 hours earlier and done it, or waited 12 hours and done it the next day. There was nobody who was like dead. There was nobody who was dying. They were in almost every case somebody who'd been afflicted with something for years and years and years, and Jesus shows up on the Sabbath and He heals them. Have you seen The Chosen? I'm liking what I've seen. I'm on season 2 of The Chosen. It's about Jesus and His disciples. And a lot of it, they're just providing some background stories that they create on their own, but I like them anyway. And Jesus does a healing on the Sabbath, and he's walking out of the city, and his disciples ask him, why did you do it on the Sabbath? This guy's been sick for 40 years. Why the Sabbath? And he goes, sometimes you got to stir things up. I doubt Jesus really said that, but that's cool. And God's going to do things in your life that actually, you don't like this, make things harder. In Psalms, it says this. It says, teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Now, here's the thing. The straight path is usually not the easy path. If there's an obstacle in my way, what's the easy path? Around the obstacle. What's the hard path? Over the obstacle. Under the obstacle, through the obstacle. That's the hard path. Frequently, the straight path is the hard path. Frequently, the path God leads you on is not the easy path. As soon as you get this idea out of your head that following Jesus is going to make things easy, your life's going to be a lot better. Because he frequently does things the hard way because there are lessons he can teach you. There are lessons he can teach the people around you by taking you through the hard path, the difficult path, the challenging way. Don't expect easy. Because God had some things he wanted to teach the Israelites, and God had some things he wanted to show the people around him, their enemies, before they even got into the land. And so God brought them there during flood stage and parched the Jordan. Well, here's two things that happened, like I said. Number one, it encouraged Israel. How do you think you'd feel after you walk through You're watching. Here goes that priest, and he's walking across, and there's the flood stage, water, and he steps like this, and the way it describes it is as his foot is coming down, the water stops. It doesn't say that when the priests are on the side of the river, they got 10 feet to the edge, and they start walking. As soon as they start walking, the water parts. What it says is when their foot was coming into the water stopped. Now, that's going to give you some encouragement later in life. That's going to make you excited. What do you think it did to your enemies? Well, we learned last week that they were already scared of the Israelites. God had already started working panic into their hearts for the Israelites. And when the water parts, this is my guess, I'm betting when that news got back, there was a lot of underwear being changed. Could be wrong. But I'm thinking that's what happened. But here's the thing. It terrified them in a way you may not have ever thought of. Because water to them was a big deal, especially large bodies of water. Because there's a lot of things you can control. You know something you can't control? Water. Right? You look even today, with all that we can do, a hurricane will bring a lot of water, and there is nothing we can do about it. Flooding, there is nothing we can do about it. Water is out of our control. And imagine what it was like then, when you couldn't even predict it. Matter of fact, in ancient times, water frequently epitomized chaos. It was the symbol of chaos. It was frequently viewed as a god. And to control water was to control the uncontrollable. If you were controlling water, you were in charge of stuff that nobody else could touch. So did God ever control water? Oh, yeah. In the Old Testament, Genesis 1. God takes the water and the dry land, and he separates them. For us, that's no big deal. He took water and dry land, and he separated them. For them, he took the chaos that was water, and he separated it and created order out of chaos. That's how they would have seen that. That's how they would have heard it. And so God was doing the unthinkable. He was controlling chaos. There, of course, is Noah's flood. There's the parting of the Red Sea. There's this stopping of the Jordan. Did you know that happened 3 times? This time the Israelites cross at flood stage, and then a whole bunch of years later, a guy named Elijah's coming through, and he's just in a really bad mood, and he hits the water with a cloak, and it stops, and he walks across. And then a little bit later, his follower Elisha, who is trying to be his successor, comes along and takes the same cloak and parts it and walks the other way. So in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible is just full of God controlling water. Does it happen in the New Testament? Sure. What was Jesus' first miracle? He took chaos and turned it into party. I mean, the only thing I could think that would be equal to that or equivalent would be rocks into Doritos. I think that would be similar, or do both. But Jesus also walks on water. Walking on something is not just controlling it, it's dominating it. He's dominating the water. And there's the big storm, and Jesus calms the storm. Do you remember where he was when he calmed the storm? Was he in a field? He's in a field, there's a big storm coming. He says, no, he's in the middle of the body of water. He's in the middle of the chaos, and he stops the storm. But with the incredible deep incantation of, shut up. That's the Steve Davis translation, but it actually says, be still, which is, so God is controlling water. He's controlling chaos. Is there anything in your life you dislike more than chaos? Anything in your life that you fear more than chaos? Concerns you more than being out of control? Isn't that like every one of us' biggest challenge is how do we handle when we're out of control, because we're all control freaks deep down? And so we see God taking the hard path so he can teach us that he's in control of chaos. And if God controls water, he controls your situation. You're looking at what's coming in your life, and you know what's going to happen, and it's out of control, and it's scary, and it's... God's in control of the chaos. Matter of fact, I love how this goes here. Because they step into the water stops, and then as soon as the priests carrying the Ark of the Lord's Covenant came up out of the riverbed, their feet were on high ground. The water of the Jordan returned and overflowed its banks as before. As soon as everybody was out, the priests walking different. I'm betting they're walking different. Don't you think so? I'm thinking they walked like this. How'd they walk out? Okay, and that brings us to the last. There's a lot of chapter 4. I'm going to read just a couple verses in chapter 4. But chapter 4 is a weird chapter. Let me just read you the first couple verses. When all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan. So where the priests were standing, go around them. There's always rocks in the bottom of a stream. Go to the stream and find 12 good rocks. Have guys do it. Why do you have guys do this? Any ideas? Guys plus rocks equals competition. Right? I mean, I'm not making this up, right? If you send 12 guys, you're going to pick 12 big guys. What are they going to try to do? I got the biggest rock. I got the best rock. They're going to pick the best rocks and the biggest rocks, and they're going to come out going, mine's better than yours. I got a bigger rock than yours, wimp. I want you to take 12 guys, go into the middle, around where the priests are, and I want you to gather one rock per guy, and I want you to carry that rock out, okay? Carry them out and pile them up at the place where you will camp tonight. Here's the weird thing. Chapter 4 of the book of Joshua is primarily about rocks. It's a rock chapter. It's about instructions about rocks. You take these rocks and put them here, get these rocks and put them there. By the time they were done, not only had they taken the 12 rocks out of the middle of the Jordan where the priests were standing, they had taken 12 rocks from the campground and put them in the same place where the priests had been standing. So there's a pile of rocks in the middle of the Jordan. There's a pile of rocks in the camp. There's piles of rocks all over the place. And you're going, why are we playing with rocks? I mean, it was all fun and all, and there's a nice little pile of rocks over here, but why are we playing with rocks? Because God knows one of our biggest weaknesses, and that is as soon as I get through a problem, I put it in the completed tasks file, and I go move on. As soon as I get a big blessing, I put it in, and I go, gee, thanks, God, and then I move on. And I never stop to remember. And so Joshua with the rocks is telling them, don't forget to remember. Don't forget to remember. See, there are challenges you are facing or will face, and you're upset and stressed about the challenge, but if you just rack your brain enough, you'll realize you've been here before. This is not a new challenge. You've been through something very, very similar before. It's just you forgot about it because you forgot to remember. You forgot that you've already been through it. You didn't take a pile of rocks and put them over there so that when you cross the same river again, you go, oh yeah, I've been here. Oh yeah, I've done that already. Oh yeah. So when you're looking at what you're going through now, rack your brain and remember what God's done in your past. And let me give you a challenge and some homework. Because when you get through with this one, when God gets you through the coming challenge, take time to thank Him. And also set up a memorial so you're more ready for your next challenge. Matter of fact, let me take it one more notch. Here's your homework. I'm not going to check it or anything. You're not handing any in. Today, on your way home, with your partner, if you're by yourself, alone, but just think of 2 or 3 times where God has worked in your life, where you've had a big challenge and you got through it, where you've had a big opportunity and God's delivered, where you've had something that could have been crushing and God was with you and you made it through. I want you to think of them, but I'm not done. Don't just think of them. Don't think of 2 or 3. Memorialize them. Make a memorial for 2 or 3 times in your life that God has really been with you. Maybe get a picture of an event that reminds you of that time that God was with you. Maybe find a piece of art that'll remind you of the time God was with you. Maybe if you're one of those artsy people, make a piece of art that reminds you of 2 or 3 different things and then put them in your house. And it'll do 2 things for you. Number 1, you'll walk through and you'll see it and you remember it. That's not just a picture, that's a memorial. That's the pile of rocks. It's not just there for decoration, it's there for inspiration and motivation and determination. And you'll see that, and every time you'll remember that time God worked in your life. And you'll be reminded. And the next time something big happens, you'll walk past that. I promise you this. You'll walk past that and God will go, remember that? Because right now, there's people in this room, there are people watching online, and you're wrestling hard with a problem that's not that different than ones you've already been through. And if you'll just remember those, if you'll just bring those back to remembrance and remember how much it hurt, how challenging it was, how hard it was. Don't gloss over it. Don't polish it up. Take it just like it was. Remember the pain. Remember the reality. Remember the panic. And remember how God got you through it. And let that impact how you view the problem you're in right now. That's the first thing it'll do. It'll make it so the next time you think you're going through something you've never been through before, you'll remember something that was similar. But the next thing it'll also do is what Joshua told him. He said, then Joshua said to the Israelites, in the future your children will ask, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them. This is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground. And by the way, I know this because there's 2 memorials. I know this is where we crossed because, yeah, there's a pile of rocks over here, but yeah, they look like river rocks, but we could have got them from the edge, but look in the middle. Look in the middle of the Jordan. Look right there. There's another identical pile of rocks, and these are the rocks we brought from the south side in. We built that pile in the middle of the Jordan during the middle of the problem. Okay? This is where this is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the river right before their eyes. And he kept it dry until you were all across, just as he did at the Red Sea, when he dried it up until we all crossed over. He did this so that all the nations of the earth might know that the Lord's hand is powerful, and so you might fear the Lord your God forever. So here's the other thing that happens. Number one is you see it, and you're reminded, and you're encouraged, and you can keep moving. The number two thing that happens is your kids will walk up to you and say, why is that on the wall? Why do we have that picture right there? Why do we have that piece of art? Why do we have that whatever thing that we put up there? Why is that there? And you can tell them a story of the victory of the Lord in your life. Way too often, all our kids hear is us talking about the trials we're in right now. And they don't hear us talk about the victories. They don't hear talk about the wins. They don't hear us talk about how we were despondent, how we were discouraged, how we were barely scraping by, and God did it. And they don't hear the stories of victory. So you put up the memorial, you put the rocks in the middle of the river, and you put the rocks on the side of the river, and when the kids go, why are there two piles of rocks? One in the river, and one in the river, one out of the river, and why do they look the same? It's because God got us through. So I challenge you, don't wait on this. You'll forget it before you start your Super Bowl party, before the first wing. Think of 2 or 3 things. And think of how you can make a memorial to them in your house, where you can see it. A picture or a painting you find somewhere, or some art if you're artistic, whatever it is, make memorials and put them up to remind you, and so you can instruct your children. Oh, and one more thing. Similar. Because your neighbor might come by, your family member might come by, somebody that you just met might come by your house, and you're showing them around a little bit, and they say, what's that? Oh, did I tell you about the time? We have some really good friends, and recently they one of their children, they had a grandchild born, and the grandchild was born to their daughter, my son and daughter-in-law, and the child had some real serious problems. And the way that the couple had their insurance figured, insurance wasn't helping, and they had a bill for like $200-some thousand. And they were trying to get the baby on Medicaid, but they didn't get the paperwork filed in time, and they appealed and everything else. And so while the baby's covered from now on, there's this $200,000 bill. Can you imagine when you've got a baby and I think 2 other kids and a bill for $200,000 and no way to pay it? And they tried everything. They appealed. Lawyers. They did everything they could think of. They could afford. And finally, it wasn't going to happen. So the daughter-in-law, I'm not making this up. This was in the past 2 months. Somebody in our church. The daughter-in-law, they gave up. The daughter-in-law called the hospital. Can I get the exact total so we can set up a payment plan? And the administrator on the other end said the balance is 0. There was a nonprofit who noticed what had happened, and they paid the bill. It's a charity, and that's what they do, and they found yours, and they paid it. There were some very happy emojis flying among us. But emojis don't last. And you may not have a story that spectacular, but you have stories. And you don't want to forget them. You want to make sure you put them somewhere you can remember them, and where you can tell your kids about them, and where you can tell your neighbors and your friends about them, so that you can pass the story on. And so that when you hit the next problem, because you're either in trouble, just got out of trouble, or fixing to get in trouble, so that when the next problem happens, you can see and be reminded of what God's already done in your past. Now, let me encourage you to make sure you act on what you're learning today. During this next song, I'll encourage you, if you want to, if you feel like you'd like to go pray. That we've got a cross over there. Just go pray and thank God. Ask him to give you the right ones to put to memorialize. You're going to take communion. We've got communion stations located a couple places in the room. Here. Don't forget to remember. Don't forget to remember that God took you down the rough path, but he got you through. Don't forget to remember how crucial it is that you keep yourself aligned with his principles, because that's the only way you make it through one of these times, is I am following what God is telling me. And do not forget to remember all the wins God has brought into your life. Can we pray? Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the wins. Thank you for the amazing things you've done in my life. Thank you for the amazing things I've seen in my friends' lives. Help me not to forget. Help me to remember what you've done, to keep it center in my life. When the next problem comes, the next challenge, the next opportunity, help me to remember how you've gotten me through. And help me to share that with others, with my children and with my family and my friends. Help me to find ways to remember and share that information. Keep me aligned with your principles. Help me not to question you when the path gets hard. And help me in my life somehow to glorify you in everything. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.